Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear student. My name is Dr. Muhammad Adnan Asghar, and we are discussing the fundamentals of dynamic mechanical analysis (DMA) under the subject of thermal analysis. Dear student, so far we have discussed some of the important aspects of dynamic mechanical analysis, in which we studied about rheology, and it was believed to be the science of flow and deformation of materials. Then we talk about the stress deforms of the materials, and then DMA measures the strain, calculating how much energy is stored or dissipated during the process. Then in the last lectures we also talk about the actual materials and linear and non-linear regions. Moreover, we also saw some of the examples of thermoplastic polymers and typical linear and non-linear regions, non-Newtonian and time-independent liquids, and non-Newtonian time-dependent liquids. Both of the terms elaborate in previous lectures. While the important one was the viscoelasticity, which was discussed in details, and then we talk about the viscoelasticity and time dependence. While viscoelastic characterization, we studied many important terminologies, which is creep, stress relaxation, and dynamical analysis. Then we also talk about the time temperature superpositions and principles of dynamic mechanical analysis, in which we studied about the some instrumentation and other geometrics of DMA, along with the different structural aspects of the instrument and their working, and the principles behind their working was also discussed in the last lectures. Dear students, we also discussed some of the modes of operation and variables in thermogravimetric analysis, in which transient dynamic are most important one, and we studied a lot about it. So we are talking about now choosing the magnitude for the control parameters. Dear student, sometimes previously gathered information may help us to choose the experimental conditions for analyzing new material. So it is very important. Sometime the previously information that is gathered by different sources may also help us to choose the experimental conditions for the analyzing new materials, and for performing new experiments in the same field. In any case, the experimental setup should take into account what parameters have to be known about the material and what the physical form of that material is. So we should aware of the different parameters of the materials, either they are physical parameters or chemical. So the previous knowledge and the experimental informations may be quite helpful for analyzing new material, and it may also help us to find out the new route for the synthesis of any desired compound or any targeted compound. So the knowledge of previous experiments is quite important for the discovery or the new exploration of materials. When considering the test of new sample in dynamic mechanical analysis, many questions may arise. For example, which geometry or mode of operation is most suitable? We can say in DMA which geometry or mode of operation is suitable. In general, these questions can be answered by following the criteria indicated in the previous lectures, and we should have to remember the limitations of the instrument. So both of the things that we have studied in our previous lectures and even previous classes, we should have a clear idea about the uh, dynamic mechanical analysis. Along with the we have to remember the limitations of the instruments, that these instruments have these kind of limitations at high temperature, at low temperature, and even at high pressure and at atmospheric pressures. So the things that can limit the instruments to perform accurate experiments may also be remembered for the successful finding of any compound. For example, for testing a gel, shear sandwich is possible in principle. An uncured thermosetting resin can be spotted on a wire mesh and tested in double cantilever mode. A very stiff metal bar is not appropriate for testing in tensile mode because the force needed to deform it is higher than the maximum force allowed by the instrument. So this is the case which should be quite clear, and we should have not to choose stiff metal bar because it may not be appropriate for the instrument. On the other hand, a very thin wire made of same metal can be tested in tensile mode. Once the geometry and operational mode have been chosen, assuming that it is clear which parameters are of interest, it is necessary to set up the magnitude of the controlled parameters. This is especially true with dynamic mechanical experiments where one parameter should be kept constant. So we should have to aware before performing the experiment with regard to the magnitude in which one parameter should be kept constant. To illustrate the problem, consider the case of a dynamic strain control temperature ramp test. The range of temperature is of interest to study and is constrained by the instrument's highest limit along with the sample's features, which is the melting point. The other two magnitudes to set up are frequency and strain amplitude. So we should have to keep in mind that the temperature instrument's highest limit, which may be the temperature range, which may be the uh, pressure bearing by that instrument, as well as the sample's features, which includes most of the time is the melting point of that particular sample. Before, so it means that before performing the experiment on the dynamic mechanical analysis, we should have to keep in mind both of the limitations of the sample as well as the instrument. It is a good idea to perform two quick tests at room temperature to choose these magnitudes: a dynamic strain and frequency sweep test. So first is the dynamic strain sweep test. This test is designed to find the regions of the material's linear behavior. The range of strain amplitude for this test can be as wide as instrument allows. Logarithm variation is less time consuming, however. It is a good provisional value for the value of frequency has to be chosen. In general, 1 Hertz is recommended for the dynamic strain sweep test. The second one is the frequency sweep test. Looking at the dynamic strain sweep test result, a strain amplitude value has to be chosen from a linear region. Again, the range for the frequency variation is supposed to be limited by the instrument, and logarithmic variation is possible. In general, frequencies lower than 1.1 Hz are not recommended since they are more time consuming and do not hold any practical advantages. Considering the results obtained in both preliminary tests, a combination of frequency and strain should be selected carefully, making sure that this combination falls within the linear regions of both tests. Otherwise, additional tests should be performed until this requirement is fulfilled. 1 Hz is recommended whenever possible because a lot of work has been accomplished using this frequency, and therefore comparison is quite possible. So the next one is interpreting phenomena. Interpreting phenomena is actually the polymers may show several relaxation transitions along the temperature range that can be detected by dynamic mechanical analysis. These relaxation phenomena are usually characterized by a decreasing step in the storage modulus and a peak within the tan theta. All of these are frequency dependent phenomenon. In figure 26, which provides an idealized plot of the storage modulus and loss tangent for an amorphous polymer. While this figure 27 actually reveals the fact of an increase in the frequency, shifting of the transitions to high temperatures. The transitions are normally denoted by Greek symbols which may start from alpha for the transition closest to the apparent melting process. In the case of some crystalline polymers, it is not clear with which transition correspond with glass transition, since certain relaxation phenomena involving chain segments or slippage between crystallites may happen inside the crystalline superstructures. So at temperature between Tg and Tm, they strongly affect the properties within this temperature range. So the sample is actually showing multiple transitions, the phase transitions, and we are actually unable to distinguish which transition should be the TG or the glass transition. Many compounds shown different phase transitions while scanning that particular compound from below room temperature to its maximum temperature. The maximum temperature for any compound is its melting point. So one should have to be careful while performing the experiment on any sample. We should have to scan the sample below its melting point. It is suggested that the scanning process should be stopped below 15 degrees Celsius of its melting point. It is generally accepted that glass transition is due to large scale main chain molecular movements. Other relaxations may happen at temperatures below glass transitions. They are caused by the motions of smaller segments within the main chain or pendant groups and may correlate to important properties such as toughness. Cold crystallization may also happen in crystalline polymers at temperatures above the glass transition. It appears as an increase in the storage modulus. So, these are the facts that one should have to be learned before performing the experiments on any unknown compound or crystals. It should be aware with the how we can number the transitions if a compound have more than one phase transitions while scanning that. We should have to mark the transitions. This is suppose 1, 2 and 3. This is the third transition of the compound, and here is the melting point of any compound. So what we have should write, we should have to write this transitions as alpha relaxation. We may write it is alpha relaxation, beta relaxation, and subsequently uh, beta relaxation, alpha relaxation, and gamma relaxation. So we have learned that the transition just below the melting point of the compound may be designated with alpha relaxation, while subsequently the downward may be assigned with beta relaxation and then the gamma relaxation. Now let us talk about the applications. Determining the mechanical properties such as storage modulus, loss modulus, and loss tangent of materials over a spectrum of time or frequency as well as temperature. Although there are many quantities which can be determined by dynamic mechanical analysis, knowing any two allows one to calculate the remainder. The second one is determining mechanical glass transition, which is denoted with TG. Dynamic mechanical analysis is a very sensitive method for measuring glass transition. It is specially indicated for some polymers that show a slight change of heat flow at glass transition Tg, so that it cannot be seen by diffraction scanning calorimetry DSC. The reason is that their content in the atmosphere amorphous phase is small. Nevertheless, even in those cases, the stiffness changes sharply at glass transition. Determining low temperature relaxations common to impact resistance behavior. The fourth one is the actually predicting long term mechanical behavior. The fifth one is analyzing thin samples, fibers, and spotted systems. The high sensitivity of dynamic mechanical analysis for measuring stress and strain means that one can analyze samples where very small forces are involved. This is the case of fibers and films. For non self standing samples, it is possible to use a support material. The support should show a constant storage modulus throughout the experiment and a very low loss modulus. Some classical forms of support include a wire mesh or a thin glass plate. The next one is analyzing cure reactions. The gel point can be accurately measured by means of dynamic mechanical analysis. The value that is reported for the gel point is the time at which the storage modulus equals the loss modulus, and we have already studied that. It is relatively independent of the frequency. Vitrification appears in isothermal experiment through DMA as increasing step in storage modulus. The vitrification time is calculated as the extrapolated endpoint of the process. Curie kinetics can be calculated from the gel times obtained at different temperatures. The next is the developing property structure relationships is actually the application of this DMA. So how we can choose an instrument? Choosing an instrument features that should be taken into the account for choosing an instrument should be the frequency range. Although one can compare instruments according to their specifications, however, it is important to take into account that very low frequencies are not commonly used on the whole since they are time consuming and do not report practical information. The second one is the range of strain amplitude, and third one is sensitivity in displacement, and the last one is the sensitivity in force. This is all about the fundamentals of dynamic mechanical analysis. Thank you very much.